And we're live. Hello, everyone, and welcome to those of you joining live. I see people joining us every second that the room clock ticks up. I know we've got people who will join us on the recording version. So hello, if you are listening to this in a recording, either Friday afternoon when it comes out or sometime in the future. Welcome to today. This is the first day of the spring 2022 xAPI learning cohort. And just as I am still getting used to saying 2022, it's super exciting to have a really big and robust cohort group to get us started. This is a fantastic community. And have you take a minute and pause and think about why you're here, why you're either here in the room live, or why it is that you're taking the time to watch this recording later on, and the connection that you have to this community. You're now part of a community over 4,000 people large. Why you're taking this time to devote to your professional development and the advancement of your career. Not only from a skills perspective, and believe me, there's gobs of skills that'll happen this session, but also from an organizational capabilities perspective and how you will be able to help your organizations take more steps forward into a more digitally centric, a data-centric learning environment. But also the connections that you will make here. And the connections that you will make here are powerful and long-lasting. And you're going to get to experience a little bit today with today's guest speaker. So my name is Megan Torrance. I am the founder and CEO of Torrance Learning and the founder of the xAPI Learning Cohort. And I'm so excited to have you as a part of this group. Some of you I recognize are returning for your second, third, fourth or more cohort, and welcome back to our experienced folks who can have a whole nother round of learning. I have an all new program for you this cohort, but also thank you in advance for the support that you'll offer all of our newcomers. And boy, do we have newcomers. We have so many new people in the cohort this time. It's very, very exciting. So welcome to you. Be sure to connect with each other. Go ahead, paste your LinkedIn links here. Tell us what your role is, where in the world you're joining us from, why you're here, right? And what you hope to get out of this. And you will find that there are people brand new to xAPI, just eager and excited to get in here. You'll find some folks who've been here for a while who can provide a guide as you go. This is a community-based learning experience. And for all of my instructional designer geek friends out there, it's also a really interesting experience in cohort-based community learning and project-based learning. So watch this on multiple levels. We have a joke at Torrance Learning. It's called "Instructional Designers Ruin Everything." Right? And we tend to approach the world differently, right? Now you'll also be a data-centric or data-savvy instructional designer, and really look out, world. Here we go. So look out, world. Here we go. Let's get started. xAPI is, well, we'll talk about what xAPI is. We'll talk about what xAPI cohort is today, how to get started, and we'll also talk about the tools and the pieces and the ways to get engaged here, and what over a long period of time this can be doing for you and for your career. So let's get started. I love all these LinkedIn links being shared here. That is just super powerful. So let's take a look at xAPI at a glance. Okay. We have 600, actually this is already out of date, 645 people registered for cohort, and perhaps a few more since then. Like I mentioned, there's over 4,000 people who have been part of this movement since 2015. So the Advanced Distributed Learning Group out of the US federal government had created xAPI, but then also created the xAPI design cohorts. And the design cohorts in 2012, 2013, 2014 were really geared around how do we get early adopters to help explore the spec and find what will be needed to implement it. I participated in one of those cohorts. I had a blast. We did a project that involved, you guessed it, a Gnome, hence the xAPI Gnome. Here's our xAPI Gnome. It's a real person. That's our Twitter handle. And we had a project that involved the Gnome. And I fell in love with the concept of cohort, a way of connecting and learning. Right? What we then did when ADL said, yeah, this is no longer really our mission, I said, well, somebody's got to do it. So I picked up this mantle and we have been running this forward, and it is huge and not inconsequential undertaking, right? And so we've been running every fall and every spring, so 2 12-week semesters a year since the fall of 2015, helping people get onboarded to xAPI. Now, you're here for week number 1. Great, welcome, we are glad you're here. You can sign up, you can encourage your colleagues to sign up all throughout the entire session. So we like to say it's never too late to sign up for cohort. So go right ahead and spread this to your network and share this with your colleagues. And we'll talk about what this is as we get going here. I'm Megan Torrance, as I mentioned. Jamie Washington is our faithful producer who makes sure that all the right moving pieces and parts actually happen and go where they need to go. Also behind the scenes is Matt Cleaver at Torrance Learning and Liz Barron, who are also there to help make sure that you have a good time here. You can follow the xAPI Gnome on Twitter to get lots and lots of updates, and of course sign up in order to get updates dropped into your mailbox every single week at www.xapicohort.com. Today, we're going to talk about what is xAPI, because I know a few of you have this question, but we're going to spend most of our time talking about, I'm calling it words of wisdom. He's probably cringing right now, with Brian Floyd, who's a strategic learning architect at Salesforce, whom I met at the cohort several years ago. And then we'll talk about some of the nuts and bolts of cohort. So let's get started with what is xAPI, and I need your help. So just in the chat, type the highest number you can type from among these choices. 1, I can spell xAPI. 2, I know what the X stands for. 3, I've actually sent an xAPI statement. Lots of 1s and 2s. You were in the right place. Ooh, some 4s, 5s. Alfonso, I see you. Yes. 4, I have received an xAPI statement. Mr. Gunther, good to see you again, a former cohort host. Nice, some 3s, some 4s. Nice. Right? 5s, I have made a business decision based on an activity statement I received in the LRS. Yes, right? So this is proving my point. Lots of newcomers and lots of experienced people here too. Right? You'll also find more experienced folks also hanging out in the xAPI cohort Slack channel. So if you have not yet logged in, that's an absolutely great community to connect with on a number of levels. So let's talk about what xAPI is, right? For those of you who answered answered 1, the X stands for experience. So let's take a look at what that means. Say you have, right, a brand new job, and on day 1 of your job, the learning and development people come to you and say, how would you like to onboard? Would you like onboarding plan A or onboarding plan B? Take a look real quick. Tell me A or B and why. In the meantime, I'm going to drink, right? They say, right? Drinking the juice. I'm drinking my coffee from an xAPI ready mug. Okay, we've got a lot of votes for B. Tell me why you'd rather have B. It's experiential. There's job set. There's real people. Real job. Everybody. No lovers for B? Come on, folks. Where are my LMS administrators? I say as a former LMS administrator. Okay? Yeah, right? So we're capturing learning. It's a variable. It's active learning, right? It's active learning. Hey, I'm going to tell you, hi, Bart, you're a telecommuter. I think most of us are at this point. But yes, right? Different kinds of learning. Here's the thing. If I want to roll out and report on at scale one of these onboarding plans, I got to have A. I have got to have A every single day because I cannot run a report and tell you about the success of onboarding plan B given the SCORM technology most of us have. Okay? Thanks, Amy, for showing some love to plan A. I know where your heart is. Right? So here's the thing. The promise of xAPI is that we can have the rich, variable, and real experiences of onboarding plan B with the same scale and trackability, or even more scale and trackability, of the experience itself that we have in onboarding plan A. So xAPI, we said A, X stands for the experience. For the non-geeks in the room, API stands for Application Programming Interface. This is the non-geek description of this. An API is an agreement between two different software systems to exchange data in a particular way. When you post in LinkedIn and have connected your Twitter account to it, and magically your LinkedIn post shows up in Twitter, you can thank an API. xAPI doesn't do anything. xAPI is the specification around which we talk about what we do. It's how we send, store, retrieve activity about not only learning, but remember there's that X, right? The experience of what we're doing also. And in this week's and last week's emails out to the cohort, we sent my metaphor around my mobile phone compared to the landline phone I grew up with that was attached to the wall, that required me to be connected to the wall in order to talk, only voice, no video, no text, no games, right? And it had to be real time. If I wanted to talk to somebody, the other person had to be attached to their wall in their house at the same time. That's a lot like SCORM, right? And those phones were reliable. Those phones almost always worked. You could unplug a new one an old one, plug in a new one, and it worked. And you know what? There are still a bunch of those old phones still operating today. And in many respects, those phones, right? Those phones, right, are similar to SCORM. And xAPI is like our mobile phones. It does all sorts of things, including making phone calls, right? But I can play games on it. It tracks me with sensors. It works when it's offline. Works better when it's online. It will do things that were invented after it was manufactured. Think about that. So what I don't want you to walk away with, right, is that xAPI is only for mobile. It's for all sorts of things, right? But that's a good metaphor, right? So SCORM, we think about SCORM and those nice, neat little packages that all look the same, right? As far as the LMS is concerned, right? SCORM has been very good for our industry. Somebody joked, right, that it's the best of the 1990s technology and implemented in the 21st century, but did a lot of good things for our industry. It's really shallow data, and it only works for e-learning. Only works for e-learning that are launched within LMSs that speak a certain language, and it gets a little bit difficult. It's a useful vocabulary where xAPI gives us a grammar. xAPI gives us a way of talking about all sorts of activities, and as long as we use this grammar, we can say anything we want, including some glorious run-on sentences. I think about, and I have thought about this for years. I've used this slide for years. Some of you are rolling your eyes like, my gosh, she's bringing this slide out. She's been using the same thing since like 2014, right? Here's the thing. xAPI works a lot like Legos. I can walk into the Lego store, buy the Death Star kit, take it home and make it. Poof, great, awesome. But I can walk into the Lego store. I can buy the Death Star kit. I can buy the Black Panther ship and the female scientist people and the rainbow folks. I can buy the robotics kit. I can put it all together and make my own beautiful custom Lego or custom learning experience, learning environment. And it all works together because they all follow the same grammar of bumps and grooves on a Lego kit. Okay. And so here you are. Let's talk about some vocabulary that will get going, right? There is a thing called a learning record provider. It's whatever sends data, right? And I love bad stock art of my job, right? Of course, anybody who's done a safety training knows that this guy's here. There's no PPE involved. Science doesn't actually look like this. I totally get it, right? But what he is doing is he's taking this little cheap pipette and he is drip, 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 drip. Each one of those drips is one of those run-on grammatical sentences. We call that an xAPI statement, right? Our activity statement is a transactional, right? Drip, 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 or sometimes open up the fire hose and just flood with data, depending on how much you're sending, right? I won't talk about all sorts of nuances, and I realize this, for those of you who are experienced in xAPI, this is a very, very oversimplified look at the basic xAPI activity statement and experience description look at things, right? You need a learning record store. If this guy is just sending drips and he doesn't have this cute little beaker to pick them up, they go all over the floor. He makes a gigantic mess and he can't collect all that in one place in order to do anything up. Okay? So you need a learning record store. And a learning record store is different than an LMS. An LRS is just a database that keeps track of your data. What this guy can also do is stick that pipette in and suck data back out and put it somewhere else, which is super cool and useful, right? I watched somebody's mind literally get blown the other day when I told her that you could take activity from one e-learning course, store it in the learning record store, and pick it up in another one, right? Anybody who's ever built e-learning knows that you can't do that, right? And so that was pretty powerful stuff. And of course, you already have other data and other legacy data around hanging out there, right? So xAPI statements are these sentences that can be short and sweet or all full of run-on sentences with lots and lots of detail, right? That lets me then do all sorts of different kinds of interesting analysis around what is going on there. It actually looks like this. It is expressed as JSON, which stands for JavaScript Object Notation, which you really don't need to know, but it's a handy vocabulary word to have, right? And those of you who are newcomers, don't worry, don't freak out. You don't have to know anything about where the colons and brackets are in order to be able to use xAPI. In fact, I've been a long-standing proponent of geek-free tools that enable anybody to access this, right? Just like we have geek-free tools that access SCORM, right? Now, I know some of the people who are sitting in today have programmed and read SCORM natively. The vast majority of the rest of the people in L&D, we thank you because we don't have to write SCORM, right? So that's the quick version of what is xAPI. Let's talk about what is the cohort, and then we're going to talk to Brian Floyd. So Brian, you're on deck right after this. So the xAPI learning cohort, just like the xAPI specification itself, right, is a free virtual vendor neutral experience, right? So the cohort is a 12-week learning by doing project based. You can do a project here. You can watch other people do projects here. You can not do a project here, right? But it's a team learning experience and a community. We have weekly web sessions. That's what this is. And then we have project teams, right? And project teams are going to work in Slack and GitHub whenever they want. You are on your own for project teams. We will help support you, but head on over there. We'll get there. And then all of that is wrapped up neatly with a weekly email and recordings of all of these web sessions sent out to the people who register for Cohort. All right. Let's talk to Brian. I'm going to stop sharing here. I would like to introduce you all to Brian Floyd from Salesforce. And I met Brian, 2016 or 17, maybe? 18? A long time ago.
Yeah, it's time flies.
A long time ago. So welcome. Thank you. I appreciate you joining us. And what have you got for us today?
Well, first of all, let me get xAPI color themed here. Okay, now I'm ready to go. Yeah, there we go. So I really just wanted to share a story with Cohort. I know a lot of you, you're just starting your journey with xAPI. Like, I saw a lot of ones and twos, and I can barely spell xAPI, and it seems like this overwhelming technology. So I thought I would share just kind of my personal journey. It's going to be a little bit of storytelling here, so bear with me. But I think you'll see that this Cohort xAPI, if you want it to, it can change everything. So I am going to be reading here. I don't usually read. I'm kind of a shoot from the hip person, but there are some points I wanted to make sure that I did. I've rehearsed it a few times, so hopefully it won't seem like I'm reading. But if I stumble or something like that, that's what's going on here. So first of all, I wanted to talk about how xAPI has really been transformational for me. And I thought some of you might resonate with my story. So we need to back up about a decade for the start of this story. I was a trainer for a paint company that you all have undoubtedly heard of, and I traveled the country teaching our customers the best strategies for selling our paint to the consumer. I'll also mention that my son at the time was around 12. Now you may think, well, who cares about your son at 12? Well, it'll have bearing on my story a little bit later. It was a very transitional time as e-learning was becoming more prevalent. It was around, but it was really just used for compliance and everybody sort of hated it. But it was really starting to come into its own with different digital mediums and things like that. I had always been pretty snappy with PowerPoint and was an early adopter of digital mediums. And I started to create basically e-learning strategies and deliver them digitally to our customer. The early success, vision, and timing led me to the role of director of training development. So at that time, I had a team of great folks who helped me create content. We got the buy-in from leadership to create a proprietary iPad app to deliver this training. And it really transitioned our model from a group of 20 trainers, road warrior trainers traveling around the country to train people, a couple of times a year. We would show up quarterly to now our sales reps being in the store training folks every single day. So we had early success, but really all we had for analytics was what Google Analytics gave us. And it showed us that the app was being used, the regions of the countries that were adopting this tech, what content they were consuming, but it was very high level data. We really needed more. We couldn't really answer a lot of questions other than, hey, this seems to be gaining some traction and it's pretty cool. So around that time, I had been reading about this new technology that was kind of an addition to SCORM or a replacement to SCORM. I couldn't really even decipher what it was. It was called Tin Can in one blog. It was called the Experience API in another. It was actually there's all these different names and no one could really define what it was other than everyone kept telling me that I was working with, it could basically tell you anything you wanted to know about your content if it was set up right. So I took a leap of faith and said, let's give it a try. And I used my budget that year to introduce xAPI into our app and to buy an LRS that Megan was talking about. So we had a place to actually send this data. So fantastic, a big investment, individualized metrics, more consumption data. Certainly we were on our way for amazing insights and some phenomenal data. Let the data roll in, and roll in it did. Well, it took me about 6 weeks to realize that our engineers, and more importantly, I had fundamentally misunderstood the uniqueness of an activity ID, and our data was junk. We ended up having to tell our LRS provider to archive our first couple of months of data because we had to start over again. Took us a couple of more months, and then we finally got there, and we were able to answer all kinds of new questions, like which digital modality was most consumed, which content was most popular, what was the sweet spot for timing for a video engagement, what was the adoption rate of our app, what days were best for training. All kinds of new data started flowing in, and we were able to make some really good business decisions off of that. So the one thing, though, is when it came to actual e-learning, stuff that we would author, and Captivate was kind of my favorite tool, but any of them all sort of work. like we were getting xAPI data, but basically all we had done was xAPI-ified the SCORM output. So we knew if they launched it, we knew if they completed it, the duration, even some quiz stuff like SCORM did. But I really wanted to know more. I wanted to know, how did the learners interact with each section? What did they click on? What did they not click on? Did they skip to the end of it and just get to the quiz and then back up and find the answers just to be compliant? Or were they really enjoying this training? That's just a sample of some of the questions I have, but I could really only answer those with gut feelings and kind of anecdotal evidence. If we were really going to know these things, if I was really going to change how it worked, I had to learn the guts of xAPI. I probably was also going to need to learn to code if I really wanted to understand how to make it part of my e-learning package. I can't tell you how many times I set out to do both things only to get so far and be totally, utterly, and completely stuck. I could find great basic resources for about the first 20% of my journey that put me well on the way. And I could find the next 70% of resources, but they were super deep technical jargon that to me kind of looked like a foreign language. And, you know, like the statement Megan just showed before my presentation. And the final 10% was like, when voila, now you get this. Well, that 70% really had me stuck for a long time. And when it came to the coding part of it, you know, there was Code Academy and I was doing the whole foobar Baz. If any of you have tried to go down the coding path, I could do some simple math and really consumed everything I could find on like Code Academy and that kind of stuff. But I really couldn't apply it in a practical way. The one cool thing I did take around from that, and if you want a place to start, if you want to get more into the guts of your e-learning, HTML was really pretty fundamentally simple to learn. And my e-learning publishing packages started to make a lot more sense under the hood when I took a look at them. I found that I could even restyle some of the elements, change a color or a font or do something like that using just basic CSS and some of the stuff that goes along with the web. I didn't have to actually do it inside of my tool. And there was also ultimately a couple of breaks that I caught along the way. So remember my 12-year-old son that I started this story with? Well, he's now 22 and a computer scientist who works for Amazon. Probably around age 16, his coding skills far surpassed mine. And he was able to help me through when I would hit that wall of learning code. I didn't need much, but I did need a few aha moments. And it's pretty cool and humbling when you know, you're 25 years senior to your son and he's showing you how it's done. So I finally found, and then as far as xAPI resources, that's about the same time that I came into this cohort. There were people on every level of the spectrum that all just wanted to learn and geek out over this tech like I did. I lurked for a couple of years, gaining inspiration and help along the way. I've led project teams. I've given presentations for the cohort before. And I mentioned a lurker. So for anyone new to cohort, a lurker is someone who joins channels, observes, learns, follows their interests in cohorts, but doesn't formally join a team or necessarily even contribute. Lurkers are a key component to this cohort because the lurkers of today are probably going to be the xAPI leaders of tomorrow. So there's no shame in lurking. There's no shame in kicking the tires and looking around. So if that's as far as your journey gets, you're still starting your journey. Okay, so what happened to that paint guy? Well, the paint company was just that, a paint company with kind of a disjointed technology strategy for learning and learning analytics. I knew there was probably more out there. And again, xAPI, a connection that I had in the industry, introduced me to another company that also distributed liquid goods. This time it was alcohol. It was pretty fun. This company was actually pretty progressive in the learning space, and they had a real emphasis on technology. It was a wonderful experience, and I met some of the favorite people who I work with today, or still talk to today, I should say. We managed learning experiences at a very large scale, or at least for me it was. I went from 500 learners at the paint company to 24,000 learners, and I honestly woke up one night in total imposter syndrome in a cold sweat, thinking like, I can't do this. I'm not a data engineer. I don't know what's going on here. I have bitten off more than I can chew. Luckily, I buckled down and applied myself, and that quickly passed, and we were able to accomplish some pretty remarkable things in a short amount of time. But unfortunately, probably only about 5% of my time was really spent where my passion was, which was xAPI. The rest was just shoring up the infrastructure it takes to run a 24,000 learner ecosystem. A fantastic stop for me. It took my coding to the next level. I was forced to learn Node, which is server-side code, so I could do some other things and keep our ecosystem afloat and add some automations and things like that to it. So that brings us to almost current day. Last September, while I had planned all of this my entire life, or for the last 20 years, things were really changing. We were sending our daughter off to college. We were about to become empty nesters, and we had bought a home in Florida a couple of years earlier because we really dreamed at living at the beach. My wife and I, actually my whole family, we all love the beach so much better than Wisconsin. So that was all going on for me at September. Wasn't really looking for a career change on top of that. But I got a ping from guess which Slack channel, the xAPI cohort, that there was a new position because there's a job postings thing that you'll find. And it was for a strategic learning architect at Salesforce. Wasn't really interested, not necessarily looking for a job, but of course, always curious. I read the job description. Every bullet point was what I'd been working towards. Every bullet point in the job description was like what I said I wanted to do when I grew up. And while things were utterly chaotic in my life, I applied anyway. I'll tell you, during my interviews, I shared a lot of the same anecdotes that I have here today. And throughout the process, I kind of kept hearing an inner voice tell me, like, this is yours. Like, everything you've worked for this. This is exactly what you've struggled for, failed through, given up on, come back to, said, I'm done with it, and then came back again. Now here I am. So, it's all really come together. I'm now at Salesforce, and let me share something real quickly. Show you what we're working on today. So we are working on something called Project Seed. Seed stands for Sales Excellence Enabled by Data, and that goes all around our enablement content. And I'll keep this very high level, but here's what we're working on. So on the left-hand side, you have everything about your learning content. First of all, we need to gather all the content metadata that we can. What is this learning about? What competencies does it fulfill? How long is the training? Where should you be delivered this training in your learning? All of that content metadata. We're working with natural language processing right now to catalog all of our content so that we're able to refer back to that. Then you've got the experience data on that side. Well, guess what that is, folks? It's xAPI, right? So that's the experience data that we're going for. Now, Salesforce is a data company. We have data coming out of our ears, but the problem is they're in disparate systems. If any of you have ever been through Salesforce's Trailhead, that's our public-facing training. We also have internal-facing training, two completely different systems that talk about learning in two completely different ways, but there's a lot of overlap with our learners. We need to unify that. How are we going to do that? xAPI. So that's the left-hand side, the content. Now we take the right-hand side and we talk about who the learner is, where they live, how long they've been in the position. Org62 performance data, Org62 is our instance of Salesforce. So of course, if we're going to sell Salesforce to others, what are we going to use as a CRM? Salesforce. So we actually know how our learners are performing. If we deliver learning, does it impact sales? Does it lead to better pipe gen? Does it lead to a higher close rate? All of those types of things. And then competency data. Competencies have been huge, right? So I like it. Something happened with COVID where competencies came into their own. People have talked about competencies forever, but I have not heard people talk about upskilling and competencies and the models and all of the things that we need to put in place ever, like I have since COVID hit. So that's another huge thing is we've got all these competencies built out. So it's great. We've got all these different buckets, but if we could put all of those things together, we could create a personalization engine. That personalization engine could deliver what you need when you need it. You shouldn't have to search for learning. Like, think about the last thing you went to buy. Kind of almost scary, right? Like you've said something to your significant other, like, hey, I'm thinking about maybe buying this. And then all of a sudden it just kind of magically shows up in your feed, right? Well, imagine if that was your learning experience. Imagine if you were like, boy, I'm not quite sure how to negotiate through this sale. And at that same time, something showed up in your feed that said, top 10 tips for negotiation. This is how we've closed these industries using similar type things. That would be a pretty amazing world. So that's what we're working on now with Salesforce. So, we talk about acronyms and xAPI and all that. Well, now I'm learning new acronyms. I just recently, because again of Cohort, came across what the ADL has been working on, which is the total learning architecture. The total learning architecture takes this picture that's over here with all of these data sources and gives us a model to snap all of that into that's repeatable. So if we can figure this out at Salesforce and build this out, you may see someday a product at Salesforce that will take your total learning architecture and you can just snap into that. And now it becomes a Salesforce product. So that's what I'm really passionate about today. And that's what I've been working on, is now taking xAPI to kind of that next level. And I feel like I'm starting all over again. There's all these new acronyms, all these new terms, all these people so much smarter than me that I need to learn from. But what a wonderful opportunity. So kind of in closing, I tell this story because I'm going to be 50 this year. A decade ago, I liked what I did, but I didn't love what I did. I always wanted to work in tech, but pretty much surmised I was too far down the other career paths and other life choices for that to be a thing for me. I couldn't afford to start over. But luckily, I stumbled across what at the time was kind of this niche new technology that nobody really understood, and finally is starting to gain some tremendous traction. So I wanted to finish this by saying xAPI, this cohort, can change everything if that's what you want. I also want to say that if any of you have any questions, get stuck, hit the wall, need that resource that I so desperately wanted years ago, I'm here for you. I'm in Cohort. Direct message me. I can give you other ways to get a hold of me if you like. Don't be shy. I really want to give back to this community. It's helped me so much. I feel like I have no option but to help back, right? Also, this isn't unique to me. The community is full of people just like me, like-minded, super helpful individuals that just want to see the community grow and thrive. And who knows, a decade from now, in the twilight of my working years, maybe one of you will be my executive vice president in charge of global learning infrastructure. If so, remember me during my compensation review. I just want to say thank you so much to Megan and the Torrance team for providing such a wonderful resource, such a wonderful community. Let's do some amazing things this cohort. I haven't declared a project. I have a few people that have kind of asked me, what are you going to do this cohort? And I'm not really sure yet. I'm really interested in some of the projects that others are doing. One is actually even kind of continuing on a project I started a few years ago. So interested in that. But I think I'm just going to be the lurker. I'm just going to pop around and contribute wherever I can and help wherever I can. So if I can benefit any of you, please reach out to me. Can't be more excited that Cohort is here again, and also excited to be in a position where this is my everyday. I talk about xAPI, I talk about learning architecture. I want to share that with the world and help any of you that are trying to get there as well. So that's my story. Thanks so much, Megan. And thank you. That's all I can say.
Brian, you have made my day. I have a couple questions for you.
Sure.
Can you stop sharing so we can see the bigger version?
Oh, yeah, my bad.
So first of all, if you have any job openings, will you be posting them in the Discuss Jobs channel on Slack?
That's a great idea. Yes, and we will be having some job openings for sure this year, because we're just we need to be shovel ready. It was what I was told by our vice president by February 1. So lots of work to do here in the next couple of weeks.
That's really soon here, friend. So yes, right. So I think what I love here, right? You covered wanting to do more with your learning, spending some time lurking, jumping in and collaborating, using this as a network to find answers, to find jobs, to experiment, right? One of the things I love about, I was talking to somebody the other day, they'd love to get involved with xAPI, but they don't have the infrastructure or the support or the budget or anything, but they're excited because what they can do here is they can actually make something with free, cheap, and borrowed or donated tools.
Right.
And get help doing it. And so it's kind of this fun offset. So what would you say to somebody who's not quite sure where to get started in all this?
I would say there's so many different disciplines within xAPI where you want to be, right? Like I always talk about instruction. When it comes to instructional design, I don't expect any instructional designers to really understand xAPI, at the level that I do. But what I want to help them do is make their learning better, or make their learning more powerful, or overcome hurdles that they've had. I'm not really a fan of doing instructional design. I can do it, but I'm not great at it, right? It's just not really my thing. There's so many of you that are so much more talented. But that leads me to say is, find an area that you're passionate about, whatever it is, whether it's instructional design and I want to make my course adaptive so that it'll change based on who the learner is. Just pick that one thing and plug away at it, right? And to your point, Megan, maybe you won't be able to deliver it commercially, but using the tools at Cohort, you can get an instance of an LRS. We can show you how to send a statement. You can absolutely test some of your theories and play around. And really, hopefully what you'll be able to do is come up with a business case so you can go back to the business, show them exactly what you're talking about, and get the funding that you need. Because that's really the biggest challenge is this xAPI can be so powerful, but I can't explain to the C-suite how powerful it is or why it's powerful because I'm just one little person down in, running the LMS and, I show them a few graphs, but there's such a broader world out there. And really all you ever need to, convince the C-suite is show them ROI, right? So find a project that'll deliver ROI and just kind of hone in on that and just keep plugging away. And you're going to hit walls and you're going to say, I can't do this. And you're going to say, this is too hard. But I was that same guy and here I am today. So if I can do it, anybody can do it.
We can all do it. Okay, I promised you I'd ask you this question. Can you tell me what an endurance longboard event is? Do I have that right?
That's right. So I mentioned skateboarding earlier. You can probably see a couple skateboards behind. So not only did competencies become popular during COVID, so did skateboarding for me. I found myself kind of stuck alone for about 6 months at my Florida home with nobody to talk to, no place to go. So I picked up longboard skateboarding, and I always kind of skateboarded over the years, but started doing that. And now I skate every day, about 2-3 hours, somewhere between 10 and 20 miles. But in Miami in February, there is Ultra Skate, which is a 24-hour skate endurance race of how far can you skate in 24 hours. It's not really a race against each other as much as it's a race against yourself of willpower, how far can you push, how much sleep do you need, all of that kind of stuff. In my age class, 330 some miles is the record. Like I'm gunning for 100, right? If I can get 100 miles, I think I've accomplished my goal for this time around. So, but just thought it'd be something neat to do and something to keep me active and, moving around at the beach.
I love it. I love it. Just think you're about to age into a new age class. Welcome to the 50s, my friend. There's some benefits there. Brian, thank you so much. We're going to, as usual, pick back up with Cohort Business. But thank you for your gift of your story and your time and your passion and your insight. So I want to thank you, everybody.
Yeah, and thank you, Megan, for giving us such a great platform and the opportunity. Like I said, can't wait to give back. Love it.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. Well, everybody, let's talk about what this platform is, right? So we talked about projects. We talked about these weekly web sessions. You will have a presentation every week. That did not share the way I had wanted it to share. There we go. Okay. So xAPI Cohort, every week here at this same time, this same link, this same place, we have basically a curriculum over time, right, of how we learn about xAPI. So we're going to start with what is it and how do I do it, right? How do I send data from an e-learning source? We'll do that next week. How do I send data from something that's not e-learning? We'll do that the week after that. And then that fourth week, we'll do something really cool. I promise it'll be cool. We're then going to look at how do I receive my data? How do I build an ecosystem in which all my data is talking to itself, right? So we've got sessions on learning record stores, on learning analytics, a few interesting surprise sessions that I'm working on just confirming. I can't quite tell you the details yet, but hopefully by next week. And then we wrap up with xAPI in action. So we will see some at-scale projects actually working. And in these, each week we send out an email with Aaron Pross. We will absolutely talk about getting data from LRSs, right? But we will we'll talk about some at-scale learning case studies, but also in our weekly email, also going to be sending out old case studies from prior years. So lots and lots of case studies, right? We want you to see what it looks like in action. We have project team demos. Hold that thought. And then the xAPI party, date TBD, but between the xAPI party and the Learning Guild's Learning Solutions Conference in April, there's lots of opportunity to get publicity and speaking practice and credibility and your name out there. And the ability to gather input and feedback from people who are out doing these things in the world. And so that will come in that April-May timeframe. At the same time, this purple column down the right, if you are taking on a project or lurking, Brian Floyd said it here, today's cohort lurkers are the learning leaders of tomorrow. I love it. I want a t-shirt. Let's print it up. Right? We'll be generating some ideas, forming teams. Peter Gunther shared a great video taking Tuckman's forming, storming, norming, performing, adjourning model for team development as it relates to the Lord of the Rings. It's absolutely hilarious. It's exactly what happens here at Cohort, right? You'll then have the opportunity to design, build, test, get help, repeat, and be weekly sharing your updates in this section, this last 20 minutes of Cohort, right? And at the very end, you'll actually share out demos of your projects. Now, don't freak out. Don't freak out. We know that in 12 weeks' time, what you're sharing is still a prototype mode. We actually one year had somebody share, instead of the presentation they wanted to, which was a demo of a prototype that was going to do all these amazing things, their presentation was actually, why is it so hard to get data from other people in the organization when all of us L&D people are sharing data from platform to platform to platform? It was hilarious and very real and authentic, right? Other times we have demos of storyline, rich storyline interactions and great xAPI data for that, video interactions. Do me a favor, those of you who are experienced cohorters or know enough about Cohort that you already have a project idea, do me a favor, can you put not the catchy title, but the what that project did in the Slack, right? Now, the question that Ian had was, how do you join the Cohort Slack? You join the Cohort Slack by joining the cohort. And so if you sign up for xapicohort.com, you will get in on the weekly mailings and the invitation list, and you will get in on the cohort Slack. Right? It all happens automatically, and that way you're fully in the loop. Right? Fully in the loop. Yes, there was an H5P xAPI cohort project. That would be a great idea for a cohort project. So as we get going here, right, we talked about how do we engage in Cohort, right? However you can, right? You can be in a project, contributing in Slack, meeting with your team. Most teams meet like weekly. They post the meeting recordings back to their Slack channel. You can come up with your own ideas. You can follow along with somebody else's idea that sounds cool, whatever, right? Whatever. You can be in observer mode. Brian described this. You're not actively working on it, but you read the Slack, you can add ideas. Just because you have joined a Slack channel does not commit you to actually doing anything. I'm going to say that again. Joining a Slack channel to watch what's going on does not actually commit you to doing anything. Okay, so if you want to spike a project, we'll talk a little bit about how to name your project in Slack so people can find it. And those people who might find it might be observers or fellow project team members. And then the third way, right, is this listening in or this lurking, right? You're here on the weekly email messages, which will include recordings as well as great content. There's no commitment. Lots of people just watch for a little while and then jump in. And lots of people on their first cohort jump right in, right? Do what makes sense to you. It's totally fine, right? So the where of Cohort depends on what you're doing. Here we are in AirMeet. There's Slack that we've been mentioning. GitHub is a file repository tool. If you have shared files for your project, you can absolutely we will hook you up with a GitHub project. It's a nice thing, right? Nobody has to volunteer their Google account or their servers or anything for their cohort work. And it also means that your work is saved and shared and available for other people. It also means that if there is a prior cohort that worked on something that you're interested in and they put their files on GitHub, you have the ability to pick up where they left off, right? So one of the questions we had was, are these projects public? Yes, they are. You can work on a private project off on the side, show up for Cohort, give updates if you want, use Cohort as the accountability structure for keeping your team moving forward. Totally cool with that. That happens, right? But your work together on Slack is public. So if you don't want it to be public, don't put it on Slack. Your files on GitHub are public. If you don't want them to be public, put them somewhere else. And then the other cool thing, and it's been hinted at a few times here, there are tons of free tools and experiences that are offered by xAPI vendors for people who are in Cohort. Extended free trials, free software that otherwise isn't free to other people, extra support and help if you ask nicely. At the same time, you can expect that Cohort is a vendor neutral place. You will not be hit up for sales. The list is protected and we don't sell things to it. In fact, my company sells services and software around xAPI, and it drives our marketing team and my marketing consultant bonkers, but we do not market to the Cohort list, right? So that's really important, right? Cohort is an opportunity. Let's talk about Slack. When you get into Slack, there are channels, right? Channels are rooms or conversations, right? There are different ways of naming, right? You just name your Cohort channel in a way that makes it obvious what you're doing there. So a team, you wanted to make a team around drag and drop interactions or whatever, or Alexa or CMI5. We saw some people who were interested in that. Feel free. There's actually an existing one on CMI5. If you want to do CMI5 and really geek that out, there's an existing team you can join. So name it with a prefix of team. If you go in and you're surfing and there's something that looks interesting, but it has a Z and a number and a season before the team name, that means it's an old team. Remember, this is our 14th cohort, right? 14th cohort. So there are lots of old project teams. So go ahead and go find some old stuff if you want. Just rename the team name and take off the cohort or the archive, right? There are discussion channels. We don't expect you to be making a thing. If you are in a team, we will be asking you to give team updates, and we will be asking the team, or we'll ask the team, and we'll ask the team, do you want a demo? Discussions, including the one that Brian mentioned, that discuss jobs, right, are discussions that we don't expect to actually have a project. There's all sorts of discussions, right? And then some really helpful ones. Main, that's where most of the action is. If you start a new cohort project team, you might want to tell everybody in Maine, because it's hard to find them sometimes. And you could say, hey, everybody, I just made team drag and drop. Come on over here. This is what we're going to do this cohort. Social, just hanging out. Resources and recordings is where we put the recordings each month or each week. And then there's lots of free stuff in the demos, right? Lots of free stuff. Go ahead. If you're not a familiar Slack user, you will be. Another piece of technology you'll learn this semester, just go ahead and click that Browse Channels or Create Channels button in the Slack menu. Cohort or GitHub, we're going to talk about GitHub more next week. Heads up to you, Matt Cleaver. We're going to talk more about GitHub next week, but you do have the ability to request a GitHub page or space. And that's a really, really fantastic way to store your files, post your weekly updates, although we can be really flexible with that, and share your work with the world. Whew. This is a lot. I know. Something new, lots of moving pieces and parts. Everybody's super excited. I have had a very, very strong coffee. Can you tell? At this point, right? And I know I've got some questions people have queued up. And so Jamie, I'm going to ask for questions in a moment if I haven't answered it already. At this point, it is absolutely okay to not know anything about xAPI. At this point, it is absolutely okay to already know a lot about xAPI. Both of those are okay conditions. At this point, it is completely okay to not know anything about coding. 12 weeks from now. It is absolutely okay to not know anything about coding. That's all right. It's also perfectly okay to be an expert developer who's looking, like Brian was saying, right? He's not an instructional designer. He's more on the technology side. So he's helping other people. If you are a developer, you will probably be pretty popular around here. Okay? At this point, it is completely okay to not have any idea what or if you want to do for a project team. Okay? It is totally okay to have an idea. Actually, I think we've got an H5P, an LRS for a Wix website, and a CMI5 team that are already kind of forming over here in the chat. I love it. It's totally okay to continue a prior project from a prior cohort, and I know those are in there also. Right? It's totally okay not to join a team. Totally okay to join all the Slack channels and never actually do a lick of work. You can just watch recorded sessions. We love having you here though, right? This chat conversation is fantastic. And you can join a team late. You can be on the mailing list just in case, whatever. There are no hurdles or requirements or application process to be on a team, right? Now, here in Cohort, it is not okay to sell your stuff. Okay? It is not okay to be a jerk to other people. It's not okay, I don't mind, but your company might, to work on your company's proprietary top secret stuff on Cohort. And it is not okay to sue your teammates for giving you bad ideas. So if you work on a team, you may contribute ideas, code, effort, sweat, right, into something that somebody else then picks up, right? You work together on a prototype, somebody else picks up and does something with that. If that something with that turns out to be a horrible idea or full of bugs, right, it is not okay to sue them. We are working under the understood Apache 2.0 license here. I am not a lawyer. I don't want you to be, but if you'd like to read more about it, there's the link. Okay? It would be so awesome to finish the 14th cohort and never have to talk to a lawyer. All right. Yes, those. I will request that you use test data or anonymized data, whether you're in higher ed, K-12, or corporate. I don't want to see your actual employees' names, any of them. Thank you, Andrew. That was a great reminder. We want it to be easy to get the help you need, which means I can't answer questions from all 642 people of you. If you have questions about xAPI, post it out in the Slack main channel and somebody will answer it. Or if it's a nerdy question, put it in the Slack Discuss Development channel. Another great place to get answers. If you have questions about Cohort itself, what is it? Is it really free? When does it meet? Where's my link? Right? You can email xapicohort@torrancelearning.com and one of us will get to you. So, Jamie, let's talk about some of those questions real quick. I know we are very short on time left. I want to be close to wrapping up on time. So let's have a question. Yes, absolutely. You know what? There are some books or articles on xAPI. Vendor sites have really great stuff. Learning Solutions Magazine has really great, it's an online magazine. It's by the Learning Guild. Go out and get it. There's tons, just search for xAPI. There's tons of stuff there. ATD has a few resources. Investigating Performance by Janet Lana Efron and Sean Putnam is great. So go ahead and grab those. I know I just spewed out a bunch of things, but there are good things out there, as well as the ADL. So those of you who know good sources, start throwing them in the chat. Next question. You will absolutely have the recording. Yes. Next question. If you were signed up for Cohort. I know some have asked to record it. Will slides be made available? When we do have slides, yes, they absolutely will be. Will the new teams be set up in the main Slack channel? So new teams, everything happens in the xAPI cohort.slack.com. Teams then get set up in channels and they all start with the prefix team. Great question, Max. Thank you for the opportunity to reiterate that one. We'd love to see how CMI5 Zara, absolutely. I recommend you go out and search in the channel browser. Search in the channel browser for CMI5. Put the 5 next to the CMI. You'll get a better search result. There is an existing team already. Will we do anything with CMI5? Ethan, follow Zara over to the CMI5 team. I love these questions. You can get lots of xAPI. This is an answer. Thank you, Khalid. Yes, Khalid's one of our speakers later on this the session. Lots and lots of good stuff. Your vendor sites have a vested interest in making sure that you have the information you need. Whew! That was the lightning round of questions. And Jamie, I think we actually just answered all of the questions. Wait, hold on. Hello, I'm in the process of starting a community of practice around learning. We'll decide on what we want to learn. I'm going to bring up xAPI. It's a few weeks. Are there videos? Yes. Dina or Dinah, I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing your name incorrectly. There are absolutely videos every single week that we will send these out as long as you are signed up in the xapicohort.com page so that you get these emails directed to you every single week. Whew! Everybody, this is so exciting. Welcome, welcome all of you. I will see you on the Slack channel. I will see you here next week. And I'm looking forward to making some really cool stuff with you this semester. Thanks, everybody.